enough, and if it's having the desired impact on the organization?
Well, the last step in team building processing is about reviewing the end results. Patrick, the work of most functional and cross-functional teams, it doesn't end. As goals are accomplished, new ones are selected. It's very important for the team to create a system to track progress against the achievement of the goals on a quarterly basis. A team that celebrates milestones, adjusts the plan as needed, accomplishes their goals, becomes re-energized and excited to receive the next challenge. Another best practice is about creating a team scorecard. A scorecard can help the team reflect and evaluate how each member and the team itself and how they're doing in relationship to trust, as well as the 8 foundations for building successful teams that we talked about earlier. Purpose, priorities, trust, accountability, etc. Great teams succeed because they care about every single member as much as they care about achieving the goals.
This is great, Kim. You have so much to share, and I have so many more questions I want to ask you. Let's open it up to the audience. I know we've been getting a lot of different questions throughout the webinar. Let me just pull up some of these questions, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on them, okay? The first one is, during this presentation, one of the speakers talked about how a sales guy and a finance guy had trouble seeing eye to eye on business issues. I think that was in Amy's story. To avoid conflict in a new team, would it be better to put people with similar work styles and personality traits together?
Well, my opinion on that would be that diversity, which means having people with different styles on the team, creates a lot more opportunities for the group to see different perspectives. If we have people that are too similar in style, what happens is what I'll call group speak, and everybody kind of thinks the same, does the same, anticipates next person's thoughts, and at times that doesn't really offer different perspectives.
Interesting. Another question we have here, Kim, you talked a little bit about having a facilitator or an outside consultant involved in the team building process. And I know Crystal talked about that, how it helped to open people up and ask questions that they might not ordinarily ask her. Is it really necessary for a team to have a facilitator, or can someone on the team itself act as that person?
I think that having an outside consultant come in and assist is a much better road to travel. The reason why is because the outside person offers perspective. They're not engaged in the team, so therefore they can ask questions and they can really concentrate on the team's process. If you're a member trying to facilitate the entire team building session, it's hard to wear 2 hats, and that can become convoluted and confusing for both the team and the team member.
So it's really someone else there who can bring that objectivity and other insights that will be hard to do when you're inside the team itself.
Absolutely, because it's hard to be a participant and a facilitator. Now that's different if you're facilitating a little small section and assisting the consultant that might be offering the team building program, but to run the whole thing would be very challenging.
Interesting. Good. Another question from our audience, Kim. If you're part of a team that works pretty well already, do you really need to go through all 5 steps? Oh, this is interesting. Do you have to go through all 5 steps in order to improve? Or, for example, could you just do the workshop without doing the rest of it?
Well, could you pick and choose? The answer is yes. But should you is a whole other situation. But having the right data about the team, that's so very important because it's a springboard for how the team communicates and for trust. And actually, there's way more to team building than just doing the day. There's front-end work, there's the session itself, and then there's the follow-up to be sure that it really stuck and it just wasn't, for example, the soup of the day.
That's an interesting question, and I can appreciate it. Everybody wants to do things faster. You know?
Absolutely.
I know it's supposed to take a minute, but could we do it a little bit quicker than that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is someone asking, Kim, can you give us some good icebreakers to use to start a team building process? In other words, how do you get people to open up? It's not a natural thing. It's not something we do every day. So how do you get people to get into the whole feeling of what you're trying to do?
Well, there's a lot of different icebreakers that we could do. There's something called a history map, which each person would have the opportunity to talk about the 5 different key events that happen in someone's life, and they kind of do it as a tabletop situation, and they start to share. That's one great icebreaker that's very effective.
I've been involved in that. You learn so much about people that you've been sitting there and working with all along, and it's very moving.
It really is, because there's a concept I'll call the iceberg, and there's certain things that is above the water and certain things below the water. And sometimes you just don't know, and the more we can share about the unknown is a much better way to begin taking risk.
That's great. That's great. Let me see. Another question. Can you please clarify the wheel? I know there's a lot in that. Someone asking if we could go back to the wheel and get a sense of how that works.
Well, the way that works, it's done in a couple different ways. When I approach that tool in a workshop, I actually bring wheels with me. So each person has one, and the goal of the process is to be able to sit down, and it could be used to get your feelings out on the table. So sometimes I've found that people are very uncomfortable with conflict. They don't like to say what needs to be said because it creates vulnerability and fear and what-if scenarios. And by having a simple little tool that they could use to say, okay, we need to walk the wheel, in advance, that person would ask themselves the questions on the wheel, and then they would sit down organized in a way to say it that would be, it's much more powerful. And also, it's a way of, having that person understand feelings and thoughts. And then the other person could take the wheel and go right back at and ask and answer the questions. It's very, very productive.
It gives a process that everybody agrees upon, so that some of those awkward feelings can become the focus.
Correct.
Let me see now. Okay, how can these concepts and processes get adopted for teams of volunteers that collaborate mostly virtually? Now that's an interesting question. So, and then they're also asking about virtually as working as a board. It's interesting. I know I've been in that sort of position, and a lot of people volunteer for very, very different reasons. So understanding that is certainly important in terms of trying to get anything done.
Oh, absolutely. I think whether the team has volunteers on it, or it's a virtual team, or it's a team that meets in person on a routine basis, still the basis is trust. It's still about clarifying goals. It's still about understanding what your role is, and it's about really understanding what needs to be done and when. Virtual is a little harder because you don't see the person, but you do have the opportunity to build relationships on the phone or through other mechanisms. And you can do similar exercises over the phone, although it's a little bit more challenging.
I would think so. I hadn't thought of that till the question came up, but so many teams now are becoming virtual, and as well as you're adding languages and cultures, people living and working in different time zones. That's a very interesting thing to think about. Have you done a virtual team building process?
Virtual team building I have not done, but I could see how it would work very effectively.
Yeah. How do you evaluate the team leader is the question. And I guess that's getting at not the facilitator, but the person who this team is being brought together. And so the question is, how do you evaluate the team leader? Is that something you have an immediate sense of when you go in, or does that develop over the course of the process?
Well, there's a couple things that seem to work very well. One is, sometimes before we engage in a team building process, that team leader would like to engage in what's called 360 feedback. So what we do is we invite peers and direct reports and that person's manager and also themselves to be able to offer ratings and opinions on that person's leadership, decision-making, and some other key competencies. And that helps us get a nice baseline before we walk in the door. The second thing is we also do one-on-one interviews with each member of the team. And we could say things like, tell me about what your team leader does really well. Or if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about your team leader, what would it be? And that way we can get some nice information about that person. And we also administer that team survey, and we could also tailor that to be specific about the leader. So those are just a few strategies we use.
That's great. That really gives some clean insight. We have so many more questions, but we have time for just one more, which is asking you to give some examples of the I versus you statement.
Basically, when someone has an I statement, they talk about it from how they view the world. So, for example, when I saw the report and I noticed there wasn't a lot of detail on the report, it made me wonder a little bit about how much time you took to organize that report versus, you know what, I got this report, and you really must have rushed because you didn't get the details like you should have. See the difference?
Yes, that's very good. That's very good. And the tone is clearly different, but the message is heard in a very, very different way.
Mm-hmm. Because those are your feelings and your thoughts, and people really can't object with that. But they can object if you stick your finger and say you, because then you're more accusing of that person, and that's more defensive.
Excellent, excellent. You have so many insights, Kim. I wish we had more time. We did.